Dr. Matthews, welcome, and give us just an overview of the thesis of your book and what you plan to talk about with us today.
First of all, thank you for inviting me to be on your program here. I'm very, very excited, and I'm very excited to talk about the transformational power of voice from 3 different areas: inner voice, outer voice, and then my own work called voice integration therapy.
You described the inner voice as emerging or erupting without conscious warning from essentially a subconscious place, or a place that we typically don't know how to access. You suggest that this inner voice can provide us with useful information such as divine messages or warnings, but that it also can reveal pathologic rants, negative criticisms, and potentially inner evil.
That's exactly right. Did you know that approximately 1/3 to 1/2 of all Americans have unordinary experiences with inner voices? It's quite surprising. That's a lot of people. And there's actually 3 types of inner voices. There's the positive inner voice, which would include inspirations, vocational career journeys, solving problems, premonitions, all kinds of amazing predictions is another one. Let's hope some of them might even predict you winning the lottery. So there's all kinds of great positive voices. The second voice that I want to talk about is the voice of conscience. And the voice of conscience is really important because sometimes it comes up when we're about to break a moral code. And we've all had this experience, some of us more than others, but that's also another voice. And we also have pathological inner voices. That would be something that would be akin to people who have schizophrenia or have psychosis. Now, on a less pathological perspective, there would be things like an inner critic, and a lot of people have inner critics, and that is voices that come out and that say negative things about you inside of your body. That's also a negative, but not pathological, because most people experience that. And then there's negative ruminations when we're caught in a very difficult life situation. Sometimes we ruminate about things. So those are the 3 different kinds of inner voices. And then, of course, we have Carl Jung, who was an extraordinary psychologist and psychiatrist, and the founder of depth psychology, or one of the founders of depth psychology. Between he and Freud, sometimes it's difficult to say who did what, but he had an inner voice that he called Philemon that gave him illuminating and illustrious illuminations about life that he actually couldn't have thought of on his own. And then there's, of course, the historic story of Joan of Arc, who in the 1400s, at the age of 16, did something of she was given a mission by her inner voices, and she did something that generals today would have a hard time doing. A 16-year-old girl, and you know how many stories have been written about her. It's quite extraordinary. So there are some ideas of inner voices in history. Now, there are also inner voices that have happened in people that you and I know. For example, Paul McCartney had an inner voice that actually told him the music and the words of the song Yesterday. And you and I both know that song, and it reverberates in our lives and in our culture, because it's a very famous song. So that was divinely inspired by an inner voice. And there's also Puccini's famous Madame Butterfly is another thing that was divinely inspired. And it goes on and on and on. And the book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull, Richard Bach, who was the author of that book, was sitting and then one day had this sound come out, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And he went, "What is this?" And he got his pen, and he put his pen on the paper, and the whole book started playing out just like a movie in front of him. So he took it all down, and there became that very famous book. So it's really, truly extraordinary how amazing, powerful voices are. Some of them are so powerful that they actually change our lives, or they change the lives of the people in front of them. And one story, a spiritual story, is one of Mother Teresa. She was actually on a train when she had this experience. And she was on this train, and she had this vision that came, and the sound came out of her, and she believed it was the voice of God. And this voice told her that she is to work in the throngs with the poorest of the poor. And we know that's exactly what she did. So she was inspired by that voice, which I think was a voice of her soul.
So how do you define the outer voice?
Well, I define the outer voice as the emotional tone or quality of an individual that is consciously or unconsciously imbued with their cultural and personal history that is fueled by breath. I believe that voice is an expression of soul. It is a living process that is co-created by the environment that one lives in. Not only the external environment, the environment of the body, the health of the body as well. Someone who's really sick, they don't sound the same as when they're normal, right?
And why then is it important for psychologists to have knowledge about voice in their psychotherapy practices? How can it be useful to practitioners?
There's so many great things that we can hear in a person's voice. It's really quite extraordinary. We can hear the wounded inner child that lives within them. We can hear the inner critical mother that was, negating them as they were growing up. We can hear the grandiose person just in their own voices. But we're not trained as psychotherapists and psychologists to really hear that. So I'd like to bring attention to the whole therapeutic world, what you can hear in voices, because when I was going to school, there wasn't one class on voice ever. And none of my colleagues that I know of had any class on voice, and how powerful their voices actually are.
What would you describe as some best practice techniques psychologists can apply to helping patients tap into the transformative power of voice in order to increase a level of consciousness?
Well, there's actually 5 different levels of consciousness. And as you increase your level of consciousness, Lon, you will get deeper and deeper into your body. For example, you can relate to teenagers, right?
I have one.
Okay,
well,
good.
There was one, he's no longer, but not long ago.
But, they attach to something. I am my Mustang. I am our Mercedes. I am, whatever it is that they attach to. I am my Juicy. I am my Nike, whatever. That is called participation mystique. It is I am this. So I am attached with a brand or a look, or I am goth, or I am whatever it is. That is, we all have aspects of that. No matter how old we get, we are attached to certain things, because that's just the way humans are. But when we're younger, we are more attached. I'm sure you can relate to the different things that your son was attached to at different times. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So that's called participation mystique. That's level 1 consciousness. Level 2 consciousness is there's a bit of a break between level 1 and level 2. Is, oh, I'm not only my car, I'm not only my Gucci purse, I am my Gucci purse and I'm a person. Oh, so there's a separation level, okay? The third level of consciousness is, oh, I think there's God, there's a part that's greater than I am, and it's out there. Wow, God out there is going to help me. Fourth level of consciousness is God lives in me. There is a God in me. And there's a God out there, and there's a God in me too. It's a higher power. You can call it God, you can call it higher power. But it's a way of life where you bring in the spiritual qualities inside of yourself. And the fifth level of consciousness that I write about is where the unconscious and unconscious becomes one. It is the highest level of possibility in the Western mind. Now in the Eastern mind we can go higher, but I don't live there, so I just kept it at five levels of consciousness. And I think it's really important for psychologists and psychotherapists to know this, because as soon as a person comes in, they might be 40 years old, but they only might be in consciousness level number 2. And that will give them a real insight into their personalities. It's just another way of looking at how they're going to treat an individual.
And how do you connect or relate those levels of consciousness to the outer voice or the voice in general?
Well, you can hear anyone's consciousness level by the way that they talk. In fact, if someone comes in and they're talking in the higher registers like this, and oh my God, everything's bad's happening to me, and they're way up there, they are not in their body. They have not processed their material. They're still jammed up in the upper resonators, and they're in the victim mode. And none of us want to be in the victim mode, really. So you can hear so many things, as I have said, and it depends how deep they are in the body. The deeper a person is in their body, the more conscious they are. And the more conscious they are, the better their life is going to be. They'll make better decisions in their life, for sure.
In your book, you discuss filtered and unfiltered voices. How do you distinguish between the two?
Well, right now, you and I are using filtered voices. We are using professional voices. I'm going to give you a great example of an unfiltered voice that went global a few years ago at the Democratic, I think the 2004 Democratic Convention. Howard Dean was running at that time, and he lost a certain precinct or whatever it was at that time, and when he was giving his goodbye speech, the filters inside of his body were gone, and what came out was something that the media picked up and called it Howard's Howl or Howard's Scream, and it went global and it went viral, and I don't think he liked that very much. I don't think he'll ever live that down. That was his voice being exposed without filters. So none of us want that to happen. It's fine if it happens between our wives and our husbands, because they can live with us. But when it goes global like that, no, we don't want that to happen. Because what happens is the executive functioning button in our frontal lobes is not working at that moment. And we need it kind of to be in the real world in a real way.
You discuss the uniqueness of an individual's voice, which you define as that person's voice print, as it reflects his or her phenomenology or distinguishing characteristics. What can a psychologist learn from a patient's voice print?
First of all, I want to tell you what forensic has done with this. They are doing extraordinary things with voice prints. Did you know the width of your neck, your larynx, the shape of your jaw, your lips, your teeth, your tongue, your oral cavities, all of this will create your voice. So because we're all different, we come of different sizes, different shapes, no two voice prints are the same. It's just like our fingerprints. From a psychospiritual perspective, your voice is the expression of your soul. If you're happy, it comes through on your voice, right? If you're sad, it comes through in your voice. If your wife calls you, you know in less than a second, Lon, that there's a problem, right?
I certainly do.
Okay, and this goes for everybody. That's how powerful our voice is in terms of transmitting material. I was reading the 2006 People magazine, and there was a story in there, I swear, it's there, about a young boy who heard the screams of all these people saying how it haunts him to this day. And I'm like, there's the Alfred Wolfson story all over again. And I'm wondering how many people all over the world are affected by traumas, or people dying, people screaming, car accidents, whatever. And that have those voices that live in them and are not able to release them, that really, there are vocal techniques that can, and I believe that my work can do that.